He just wanted to help his mom, but he never imagined it would change his life forever. The ticking of the clock on the wall was the only sound breaking the silence in the small rented house. The peeling walls, the simple furniture, and the scent of reheated coffee filled the air. Liam, only 12 years old, watched his mother, Sarah, sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes fixed on a stack of bills. The dim light from the lamp highlighted the dark circles under her tired eyes. He knew things weren't easy. Ever since his father had left them years ago, Sarah had done everything she could to provide a home for her son, working double shifts at a cafe during the day and cleaning houses at night. But no matter how hard she worked, money never seemed to be enough. Liam, always shy and introspective, wished he could help. But how? What could a 12-year-old boy possibly do to ease the weight on his mother's shoulders? Then, an idea struck him, unexpectedly. One afternoon, as he walked home from school with his worn-out backpack slung over his shoulders, he passed by a music store. In the display window, an old violin caught his eye. It was beautiful, with a rich wooden glow, gleaming strings, and an almost magical presence. He stopped, mesmerized. The store owner, an elderly man with graying hair and kind eyes, noticed the boy's fascination. "You like music, kid?" he asked with a warm smile. Liam hesitated. He had never played an instrument before, but for some reason, that violin seemed to be calling to him. I don't know how to play," he admitted, embarrassed. The old man chuckled. "No one does, until they learn." At that moment, something inside Liam awakened. He didn't know it yet, but that encounter would be the first step toward a life-changing journey. Before we continue, if you love inspiring stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on anything. And tell me in the comments, have you ever done something that changed someone's life without even realizing it? That afternoon, Liam went home with a restless mind. He couldn't stop thinking about the violin in the store window. He had never even held an instrument before, but deep down, something told him that violin was special. Sitting at the small kitchen table, he watched his mother serve a simple plate of rice and beans. The exhaustion on her face was undeniable, but Sarah never complained. "How was school today, sweetheart?" she asked, forcing a smile. "It was normal," he mumbled, poking at his rice with his fork. He wanted to tell her about the store, about the violin, but he hesitated. How could he talk about something like that when they barely had enough money for the basics? That night, lying on his thin mattress, Liam closed his eyes and imagined himself playing. He didn't know how, but he felt that learning that instrument could be his chance to change things. The next day, after school, he went back to the store. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside, and the old store owner, Mr. Henderson, recognized him instantly. "Ah, I knew you'd be back," he said with a smile. Liam's face turned red. I just wanted to see the violin up close." The man carefully took the instrument and placed it in the boy's hands. It felt different than he had imagined. The strings seemed delicate, yet they carried an invisible strength. "You know, kid, I was about your age when I learned to play," Mr. Henderson said. "At first, I thought I'd never get the hang of it. But music has a funny way of finding the people who truly need it." Liam clutched the violin to his chest. "I want to learn, but I can't afford it." The old man's eyes softened. He studied the boy for a moment, then made a decision. "How about we make a deal?" Liam's eyes widened. "What kind of deal?" Mr. Henderson smiled. "You come here every day after school and help me out in the shop. In return, I'll teach you how to play." Liam's heart pounded. "Really? There's just one condition," the old man said with a wink. "You have to take it seriously. No quitting halfway through." Liam nodded eagerly. "I promise." At that moment, without realizing it, he had taken the first step toward something far bigger than he could ever imagine. The first few days at Mr. Henderson's shop were a mix of excitement and frustration. Liam had never held a violin before, let alone tried to play a single note. He thought all he had to do was slide the bow across the strings and the music would magically flow. But instead, the first sounds that came out were screechy and off-key, more like a cat's wail than an actual melody. Mr. Henderson chuckled at the boy's frustrated expression. Every beginning is tough, Liam. But if you want to get better, you need patience. Liam took a deep breath. He knew he couldn't give up. That afternoon, after sweeping the shop floor and organizing some sheet music, he sat down again with the violin and gave it another shot. "Relax your shoulder," Mr. Henderson advised. "Keep the bow steady, but don't tense up." Liam followed his instructions, trying to find the balance between firmness and softness. Slowly, he realized the sounds weren't as chaotic anymore. It still wasn't music, but it was a start. When he got home that night, Sarah noticed something different in his eyes. "You look different today," she said, as she folded an apron. Liam hesitated. He hadn't told her about the violin lessons yet. He knew she would worry, thinking he was wasting time on something that wouldn't help their situation. "Just a normal day," he shrugged. But as he lay in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about the violin. For the first time in a long while, he felt something awakening inside him, a spark that refused to die out. By the end of the week, Mr. Henderson gave Liam a new challenge. "Let's see if you can play something simple," he said, handing him a sheet of music. It was a short, almost childish melody, but to Liam it seemed impossible. His fingers were still clumsy, his ears couldn't quite recognize the right notes, and every mistake made him want to give up. "This is way too hard," he exclaimed, throwing his arms up in frustration. Mr. Henderson crossed his arms and smiled. "You think Mozart learned to play in a week?" Liam huffed, but picked up the violin again. The old master watched patiently as the boy tried once more. And then, something unexpected happened. On his third attempt, Liam got the sequence of notes right. It wasn't perfect, but it was music. His own music. Mr. Henderson clapped his hands, pleased. "See? You can do this." In that moment, Liam realized something important. Playing the violin wasn't just about technique, it was about persistence, about not giving up when things got hard, and he was determined to keep going. Days turned into weeks, and Liam started to understand that playing the violin was more than just pressing strings and moving the bow. There was a hidden secret in music, something Mr. Henderson always talked about, but that Liam hadn't fully grasped yet. "Technique is important," the old master explained while tuning his own violin. "But what really makes music touch people's hearts is the emotion we put into it." Liam frowned. "But how do I do that?" Mr. Henderson smiled and handed the violin back to him. "Close your eyes. Now play the same melody we practiced yesterday, but imagine you're telling a story with each note." Liam took a deep breath and obeyed. With his eyes shut, he tried to feel the music instead of just playing it. And then something changed. The notes, once mechanical, started to sound different. They weren't just sounds anymore. They were emotions. He thought about his mother, about her exhaustion, about the daily struggle to keep them afloat. He thought about the times he felt alone, about the fear of not being able to help her. And without even realizing it, his hands followed the flow of those emotions. When he finished, he opened his eyes and found Mr. Henderson smiling, clearly pleased. Now that was real music. Despite his progress, Liam still hadn't told Sarah about the lessons. Every day, he went to school and stopped by the shop before heading home. His mother could tell something was different about him, but he avoided giving details. One night, as they were finishing dinner, Sarah let out a weary sigh. "The bills just keep piling up. It's getting harder and harder." Liam felt a tightness in his chest. "I wish I could help." Sarah smiled and ruffled his hair. "You already do, sweetheart. You just need to focus on your studies. One day, you'll have a better future." Liam wanted to tell her about the violin, about how he was learning something that might actually change their lives, but he hesitated. How would she react? Would she be upset that he was spending time on something that didn't seem to have an immediate payoff? That night, lying in bed, he stared at the ceiling and made a decision. He was going to show his mother that music could be his chance to change everything. But first, he had to prove to himself that he was capable. Days kept passing, and Liam poured himself into the violin. He used every free moment to practice, whether in Mr. Henderson's shop or mentally, replaying melodies in his mind as he walked home. Then, one day, the old master made him an unexpected offer. "Liam, I need a favor," Mr. Henderson said as he wiped down the shop counter. "Sure. What is it?" The man smiled and pointed to a poster in the window. It was an announcement for a small community festival happening that weekend. They always have a musical performance, and this year they asked me to find someone new to play. Liam blinked, not understanding at first. You mean me? You kid? Liam's heart pounded. He had never played for anyone other than Mr. Henderson. The thought of performing in front of an audience made his stomach twist into knots. But I'm not ready, he protested. The old master crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow. You already play with emotion. And that's worth more than perfect technique. Liam stared at the poster, feeling a strange mix of excitement and fear. He knew this could be his chance to prove that the violin wasn't just a hobby. It was something that could truly change his life. He just had to find the courage to accept it. That night, Liam couldn't sleep. He wanted to perform, to prove to himself that he could do it. But the fear of failing was louder. The next day, he returned to the shop and found Mr. Henderson waiting for him. So, are you taking the challenge? Liam swallowed hard and looked at the violin resting on the table. What if I mess up? What if people laugh at me? The old master smiled. What's worse, messing up a few notes, or never trying and spending the rest of your life wondering what could have been? Liam didn't answer right away. Deep down, he already knew the answer. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the violin and looked at Mr. Henderson with determination. I'm going to do it. The old man smiled, satisfied. Then let's get you ready. At that moment, Liam took another step in his journey. He was still scared, but he was willing to face it. The sun shone brightly over the small town square. Colorful banners fluttered in the wind, and the scent of popcorn and cotton candy filled the air. The community festival was in full swing, with families strolling through the streets, children running around, and performers preparing for their acts. Liam stood backstage, gripping his violin tightly. His hands were sweaty, and his heart pounded against his chest as if trying to escape. Breathe, kid, Mr. Henderson advised, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. You've trained for this. Liam nodded, but his stomach still felt like it was tied in knots. Peeking through the curtain of the small makeshift stage, he saw that the audience was bigger than he had expected. His mother was there, sitting in the front row, completely unaware that he was one of the performers. What if I mess up? What if I freeze in the middle of the song? The thoughts swarmed his mind, threatening to take over. And then, something unexpected happened. A little boy, no older than 5, ran to the front of the stage, holding a lollipop, and looked directly at Liam. He smiled and waved, as if he were genuinely excited to see him play. Liam felt a warmth spread inside him. Maybe, just maybe, this performance wasn't about him at all. Maybe it was about what his music could mean to others. Taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes for a moment and pressed the violin against his chest. He was ready. The announcer stepped onto the stage and grabbed the microphone. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a young talent ready to perform. Please welcome Liam. Applause filled the air. Liam climbed the steps, his legs trembling, but he kept his gaze locked on the violin. As he placed the bow against the strings and played the first note, something magical happened. The world around him disappeared. The noise of the crowd, the festival's chaos, it all faded away. It was just him and the music. The notes flowed like never before. Every melody carried emotion, telling a story without words. The audience fell silent, completely captivated by the powerful yet delicate sound of the violin. And then, as the final note echoed into the air, the silence shattered with a thunderous wave of applause. Liam opened his eyes and saw his mother standing, hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The applause filled the square, and Liam felt his heart racing, not with nervousness, but with pure emotion. He had done it. He had actually played in front of a crowd, and not just that. The people felt his music. He stepped off the stage, his legs still shaky, gripping the violin tightly. Before he could take a deep breath, he heard a familiar voice calling his name. Liam! It was his mother. Sarah pushed through the crowd quickly, her eyes brimming with tears, her face a mixture of shock and pride. When she reached him, she stared at him as if trying to piece everything together. Son, you play the violin? Since when? Liam swallowed hard. This was the moment he had dreaded, his mother finding out everything. "I wanted to tell you, Mom, but—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I just wanted to help." Sarah frowned, confused. "Help? What do you mean?" Before Liam could answer, Mr. Henderson appeared beside them, smiling proudly. "Your son has a rare gift, Sarah. And more than that, he has passion." She looked at the old master, then back at Liam, still trying to process everything. "But why didn't you ever tell me?" Liam took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Because I didn't know if it was worth it. I thought you'd say it was a waste of time." Sarah remained silent for a moment, reflecting on her son's words. Then she took his hands in hers, squeezing them gently. "Liam, I just want you to have a future." He looked into his mother's eyes and smiled. "Maybe this is my future." Before they could continue the conversation, a well-dressed man in a dark suit approached them. His gaze was sharp, analytical, yet intrigued. "Excuse me? May I speak with the violinist?" Liam and Sarah exchanged confused glances before turning to the stranger. "My name is Christopher Adams, director of a music school in the neighboring city. I watched your performance, and I was very impressed. Have you ever considered studying music professionally?" Liam was speechless. Studying music? How would that even be possible? Sarah was the first to respond. "A music school? But we don't have the means for that." The man smiled. "Actually, I believe we can work something out. Our school offers scholarships for young talents. If Liam is willing, we can arrange an audition for him. And if he does well, who knows?" Liam's heart pounded. An audition? That meant he had a real chance to turn his passion into something bigger. He looked at his mother, waiting for her answer. Sarah seemed torn between concern and pride. Then, after a few seconds of silence, she smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. "If this is what you want, son, then I'm with you." A wave of emotion surged through Liam's chest. He had never imagined that a simple violin could take him this far. The next morning, Liam woke up with a mix of excitement and fear. It still felt surreal that after hiding his passion for so long, he was now about to step into something much bigger. Sarah, despite her exhaustion from work, made sure to wake him early so he wouldn't be late for the music school. As they had breakfast together, she watched him quietly before finally speaking. "Are you ready for this?" Liam swallowed hard. "I don't think I'll ever feel completely ready, but I have to try." Sarah smiled and placed her hand over his on the table. "No matter what happens today, Liam, I'm already so proud of you." That was all he needed to hear. The music school building was impressive, unlike any place Liam had ever been before. Towering glass windows, students hurrying past with instrument cases strapped to their backs, and a grand entrance hall where the sound of pianos and violins echoed through the corridors. Mr. Henderson met them at the door and gave Liam an encouraging nod. "Ready to impress?" Liam tried to smile, but his nerves were overwhelming. He was gripping his violin so tightly that his fingers had turned white. Christopher Adams appeared and led them to a waiting room. "The audition panel is ready. As soon as we call your name, you can go in and perform." Liam sat down, trying to steady his breathing. Every minute felt like an eternity. He could hear other candidates performing in the hall next door. They were incredible, precise, professional. Doubt began creeping in. What if I'm not good enough? What if I mess up? Just then, he felt a gentle hand rest on his shoulder. It was Mr. Henderson. "Remember, kid, you don't have to be perfect. Just play with your heart. That's what truly matters." Liam took a deep breath. Then he heard the call. Next candidate, Liam Parker. It was his turn. Liam stepped into the brightly lit room. 3 judges sat behind a large table, studying him with sharp, attentive gazes. He stood before them, gripping his violin, his legs threatening to give out beneath him. "You may begin whenever you're ready, young man." Liam closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered the festival, the little boy smiling in the audience, the emotion in his mother's eyes as she saw him play for the first time. And then he played. The notes flowed like a calm river. It wasn't perfect technique, but it was pure emotion. Each note reflected his story, the sacrifices his mother had made, the unwavering support of Mr. Henderson, his battle to overcome fear. When he finished, silence filled the room. For a moment, He thought he had failed, but then one of the judges smiled and said, "That was incredible." Liam's heart nearly leaped out of his chest. "We have a lot to discuss, Liam. But tell me, would you be willing to study here with us?" The boy could barely believe what he was hearing. His answer came without hesitation. "Yes!" Liam walked out of the audition room feeling like he was in a dream. His legs were still trembling, his heart pounding, but for the first time, it wasn't from fear. It was from sheer joy. Sarah and Mr. Henderson were waiting outside, their eyes filled with anticipation. He stopped in front of them, gripping his violin tightly, and gave them a shy smile. "I did it." The reaction was immediate. Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes brimming with tears. "Oh my God, son!" Mr. Henderson grinned, satisfied. "I knew you could do it, kid." Director Christopher Adams approached with a contract in hand. "Liam, as part of our scholarship program, you'll be learning from our best instructors. And if you continue progressing, you'll have the opportunity to perform at larger events. But I need you to understand, this will take a lot of dedication. Are you ready for that?" Liam took a deep breath. A few months ago, he had been just a shy boy staring at a violin in a shop window, never imagining that one day he'd even hold one. Now, he was about to take a step that would change his life forever. He looked at his mother. She still seemed in shock, but her expression was nothing but pride. "If this is what you want, I will support you every step of the way." Liam smiled and nodded. "I'm ready." The following weeks were intense. He started attending the music school, balancing his regular classes with rehearsals. Unlike the quiet, familiar environment of Mr. Henderson's shop, he was now surrounded by talented young musicians who had been studying for years. His first group rehearsal was a shock. The other students read sheet music effortlessly, playing with flawless precision, while Liam still relied on what he had learned by ear. "You've never had formal lessons?" one of the students asked, surprised, after watching him struggle through a sequence of notes. Liam felt his face heat up. "I kind of taught myself," the whispers began. Some students seemed impressed, but others exchanged skeptical glances. It was a tough moment. For the first time, he wondered if he truly belonged there. But then, he remembered Mr. Henderson's words, "You don't have to be perfect. Just play with your heart." That night, he practiced harder than ever, because now, more than ever, he knew this was his chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. The days at the music school were challenging, but Liam never once thought about giving up. He arrived early, stayed late, and practiced every note as if his life depended on it. Even when he made mistakes, even when the other students seemed light years ahead of him, he held on to the reason he started. He wanted to change his life, and his mother's. Then, a new opportunity arose. Director Christopher Adams gathered the students and made an important announcement. "Our school has been invited to perform at a major charity event in the city. This will be a chance for our students to showcase their talent in front of a very special audience." Liam's heart pounded. But before he could get too excited, he heard the next words. "Each student will go through a selection process to earn a spot in the performance. Only the best will make it to the stage." A wave of doubt crashed over him. What if I'm not good enough? But he couldn't let fear win. This was his moment. On the day of the audition, Liam sat in the hallway of the school, gripping his violin with sweaty hands. One by one, the students entered the audition room and returned with different expressions, some smiling, others looking defeated. When his name was called, he took a deep breath and stepped inside. The judges watched him in silence. "You may begin whenever you're ready." Liam closed his eyes and started playing. But unlike his first audition, he wasn't playing to impress anymore. He was playing because music was part of him. Every note carried his story. His mother's sacrifices, Mr. Henderson's lessons, the fear he had felt at the festival. It was all there, woven into his melody. When he finished, there was a brief silence. Then, one of the judges smiled. "Liam, welcome to the concert." He had done it. The theater was packed. Bright lights, a full orchestra in the background, and an elegant audience watching attentively. Liam stood backstage, taking deep breaths, feeling the weight of the moment. He spotted Sarah in the audience, her hands clasped tightly in anticipation. Mr. Henderson was there too. When their eyes met, the old man gave him a small, reassuring nod. When his name was announced, Liam walked to the center of the stage, holding his violin like it was an extension of himself. He closed his eyes, pushed aside his nerves, and played. This time, there was no fear. The music flowed freely, and each note didn't just fill the air, it touched the hearts of everyone in the room. When he finished, a deep silence filled the theater. For a second, Liam thought he had failed. Then, an applause, then another, and suddenly the entire audience was on their feet, cheering and clapping thunderously. Sarah was crying. Mr. Henderson was smiling with pride, and Liam felt something he had never felt before. He knew he had found his true purpose. After the performance, several people approached him to congratulate him. Among them was a well-dressed man who introduced himself as a talent agent. "Liam, you have a gift. Have you ever considered a professional career in music?" Liam exchanged a glance with his mother, who was still wiping away tears. Then, he smiled. "I think I already started." Liam, the shy boy who once stared at a violin in a store window, never imagining he would one day hold one, now stood at the edge of a brand new world. And he understood that when we follow our hearts and refuse to give up, we can go far beyond what we ever imagined.